Engagement Officer. She is the Public Engagement Officer for ODOT's I-5 Rose Quarter project. She has a master's in public administration from Portland State University, and she's going to talk to us today about the Rose Quarter I-5 interchange project. So with that, Rose, you may take it away.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate that, Jim, and thank you everyone for having us here today. We're really glad to be able to share about information about our project. And Natalie, my coworker, is going to pull up a slide show here we're going to go through with you to share more about the project. As Jeff mentioned, I am the Public and Outreach Media Manager on the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. And the information we're going to be providing you today will hopefully be answering your questions and concerns, and we'll be leaving time at the end of the presentation for those. So we'll make sure we get some discussion in there. And throughout the presentation, you'll hear from me, but you'll also hear from our project director, Megan Channel, who's with us, and Alex Cousins, and he is the owner's representative project communications team lead for this project. So your packed agenda today, and I just want to quickly go over what we're trying to get out for you and information-wise. We have a little quick summary of our urban mobility strategy, some project background, project values and benefits, community influence, DBE program, that is Disadvantaged Business Enterprise, a federal program that we'll be sharing more about, and the next steps that are coming along in the project. So I'm going to start, next slide please, with the urban mobility strategy that I mentioned at the top of the agenda. The urban mobility strategy is, well, our project is just one component of this strategy, which includes projects such as the I-205 improvements and the Interstate Bridge Replacement Program and the Comprehensive Toll Program. And next slide, please. Together, these components or these projects represent a cohesive approach to make everyday travel safer, easier, and more efficient in the Portland metro area. And so you can kind of see how those all fit together here in this large family of projects. And these are all very large infrastructure projects as part of the Urban Mobility Office. I'm going to turn this part of the presentation over to Megan Channel to talk more about the project in more detail here.
Thanks, Rose, and thank you all for having us. We can go to the next slide. I'm going to cover what is the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. So this is a map shown on the screen here is just to orient you to where the project is located. The project is located on I-5, really in the area that connects Interstate 84 that you can see on the bottom of your screen to the south, and Interstate 405 to the north, which you see on the top of your screen. The project also addresses the Broadway-Weidler corridor that runs east-west through the center of the project area and over and across I-5. Next slide. So the project includes a number of different elements. I like to think about it as kind of the below, above, and around. So on the below section, I'm sure everyone here has at one point or another driven on this segment of I-5 between 84 and 405. But I-5 is below, it's depressed in a trench. And what we are adding in this area is a new auxiliary lane, which is that lane that connects you from one entrance ramp to the next exit ramp on I-5. So we're connecting 84 to 405 with the auxiliary lane on I-5, as well as adding shoulders to this stretch of I-5 that gives the auxiliary lanes and the shoulders give drivers more time and space to make those merging and weaving movements where they're quite challenging today, where three interstates come together, and then the shoulders provide the space for vehicles to pull out of the way of traffic if there's an issue, if they're disabled, as well as for emergency responders to use those shoulders. So that's what's the below. By way of above, we'll be building Oregon's first highway cover over I-5 in this area. And you're probably wondering, what is a highway cover? Think of it as a wide bridge forming new land over I-5. So the highway cover will reconnect streets across I-5, but provide some new community space that you can see here shown in pink. With that, there's new community connections across, as I mentioned. Number 2 shown on the screen is a new roadway connection that does not exist today that would be provided across. Number 4 is Green Loop connection. That is a project that's facilitated by the city of Portland to program bicycle and pedestrian improvements kind of through the central city. So using the Broadway and Weidler corridors for those improvements, as well as other multimodal local street improvements in the local corridors around here. I also should mention that with the project, the I-5 southbound off-ramp that you're used to getting off at Broadway and Vancouver, as part of this project would be relocated to the south at the same intersection where the southbound on-ramp right near Moda Center is located today. So that's what the project is. By way of next slide, I want to zoom in on the highway cover component specifically. So over the past year plus, we have been working with partners to do an independent highway cover assessment process. And this process, again, as I mentioned, is a year plus in the making, but working with the community and stakeholders to take a look at what's the right approach for the highway cover design. And through that community process, including coordination via Governor Brown, the highway cover design concept that was selected was what we refer to as the proposed hybrid 3 element. And so the hybrid 3 highway cover design, again, is one single highway cover, is extended a little bit further to the north than our original design to allow for some additional community connections. But really maximizes the developable space by way of making the highway cover feasible for buildings on top, as well as the new community connections. And with this hybrid 3 cover concept, we are incorporating that into our project now, but we're doing this in a way that allows us to stay on our key milestone schedule. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. This slide really is kind of, again, taking that step back of why are we here? What's the need for the project? So the need for the project is, this is I-5 between I-84 and 405 is the state's top bottleneck, both for drivers and for freight. It's also ranked as the 28th worst freight bottleneck in the nation, which has compounding effects on the reliability of the system, but also our economy. This section also sees the highest crash rate on an urban interstate in Oregon, again, compounding safety concerns. And so with this, we have an opportunity, again, with the addition of the new auxiliary lanes and shoulders to improve traffic flow and reduce frequent crashes and improve safety. And we have the opportunities with the community building components of the highway cover and the street connections for those buildable covers over I-5, multimodal connectivity, as well as a program that provides some intentionality around the jobs and workforce and partnerships, which we'll get to in just a moment in the presentation. And then just as a note, this project, the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, is designated in Oregon House Bill 2017 as a priority and funded project to address congestion relief in the Portland metro area. Next slide. So for the project timeline, I mentioned the hybrid 3 concept being incorporated into the project. In order to do that, we need to make sure that we are in sync with federal reviews and requirements and environmental reviews. So we are, we'll be doing an updated environmental review process to assess the effects of the proposed hybrid 3 highway cover design concept, carrying that through the end of this year. Simultaneously, that is happening with different packages of our project moving forward with design and construction. The main construction package really encompasses the highway cover area, whereas there's some early work packages that will be kicking off for construction late next year in 2023 that include areas to the north near the 405 interchange and to the south near the I-84 interchange. That will be starting earlier, as I said, in late next year. So it's just a snapshot of the different packaging and timelines for the project delivery. And next slide, I mentioned the environmental assessment update. You've probably seen some media coverage on this recently, but just wanted to make sure that you knew. Again, ODOT, along with Federal Highway Administration, we are updating the environmental review by way of an environmental assessment to incorporate the proposed Hybrid 3 highway cover design concept. And again, that is taking place this calendar year in order to keep us on track for our construction starting late next year. So with that, I'm going to pause and I'm going to turn it back over to Rose for some additional updates on the project.
Thank you, Megan. So I'm going to dive a little bit into the project values and benefits. There are 4 values that act as our North Star on the project. The first is restorative justice, which the aim is to accelerate social, racial, and economic equity, sustaining positive, tangible change specifically for Portland's Black community. That is addressing the history of this highway that has gone through historically Black neighborhoods and addressing the harms that were done there by that construction in the past. Community input and transparent decision-making. The aim of this value is to have community-informed and involved decision-making through a community-connected, transparent, and inclusionary process. Our mobility focus is, the aim of this value is to increase connectivity for the traveling public and for the local community. That's multimodal transportation, rolling, walking, biking. And the final project value here is climate action, improve public health. And the aim of this value, of course, would be to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, meet local, regional, and statewide climate action goals. Next slide, please. So a lot of the benefits we want to highlight here of the project, in addition to safety and all the other things outlined here, are the new community spaces that Megan mentioned could be created on top of the Hybrid 3 cover, which can be a catalyst for future development. And also kind of reestablishing that local street grid that was disturbed by the construction of the highway in the past. Is also with the contracting kind of model that we're using for construction is bringing in these disadvantaged business opportunities, Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses that will be able to really help generate career growth and build longer-term career prospects for these companies that will be working for potentially many years on, as you saw on that timeline in this project. It also creates safer streets for people walking and biking and rolling, and overall calming and smoothing that traffic flow on I-5, and hopefully, and saving drivers a lot of hours sitting in traffic from sitting in traffic, and also the safety improvements there will help reduce crash rates and allow emergency responders to get by more easily on the shoulders that will be giving them a little more space for getting through and allowing traffic to flow as emergencies are dealt with. And then finally, just being able to move freight quickly through those bottlenecks and allowing kind of economic engine to be humming along on that highway. Next slide, please. All right, I'm going to turn this over to this community influence portion of the presentation over to Alex Cousins to continue.
Thanks, Rose. So I am going to spend a couple minutes talking about both our outreach to the community as well as feedback we've heard from the community through that outreach. And this is one of my focuses on the project, working with Rose. So this slide talks about, shows the various ways we've been connecting with community over the last few years. And big focus of our engagement is with project advisory committees. We have a Historic Albina Advisory Board providing design input to the project, and we also have a community oversight advisory committee that is more focused on the construction side and the workforce opportunities as well. We've held open houses, we've gone out into neighborhoods to meet with folks, discussion groups and interviews, we've done some canvassing door to door. A lot of what you see here in the last 2 years has been done remotely, just because of obviously the COVID pandemic has made it such that we are living a life in Zoom like we are right now with this meeting. And so a lot of our engagement over the last 2 years has been virtual. And we are really looking forward to things opening back up when it's safe to do so, so we can go back out and have face-to-face conversations with people and more meaningful engagement out in community, going to community events, going to meetings. I understand from Jeff that you typically meet at the Moda Center and you have great lunches. And so I'm sure you're looking forward to that resuming, and we'd love to join you at a future date at one of your in-person meetings as well. And as Rose mentioned, we're really focused on speaking to the Black community of Portland and getting them engaged in the project. And so we're working with traditional Black media outlets there, and then attending industry events, the disadvantaged business enterprise industry events that Megan's going to speak to in a moment. So these are highlights of ways in which we've been engaging with the community. Next slide, Natalie. And then this represents kind of like overarching themes of what we've heard back in terms of talking to people. We hear pretty loud and clear through our conversations and then surveys we've held that folks are looking for more community involvement and representation, as I said, particularly from original community members of Albina, those with family members that were originally displaced by the original construction of I-5. Lots of interest in the economic development and wealth generating opportunities of the project, not just through immediate job creation of constructing the project, but also just what those land development opportunities might look like with new space being freed up on the cover above the freeway, as well as adjacent to I-5, what that might look like in terms of redevelopment. And certainly ODOT would be one of several partners engaged in those kinds of conversations moving forward. There are concerns about ongoing displacement and gentrification of vulnerable populations. Anytime you renew an area, you end up, it often ends up displacing people who were there originally. And so we've all seen how the North Vancouver-Williams corridor has grown and changed over the last couple of decades. And so there's interest in making sure that that is minimized to the degree possible. And then climate action remains of interest to folks to see how the project can help meet ODOT's climate action goals statewide, and that we're not making climate worse than it currently is, that we're actually improving it, air quality, et cetera. And then just safety and mobility, making sure that the project provides an environment that is safer to move through using all modes of travel. So those are the highlights of what we heard. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Megan to talk about the DBE program.
Thanks. And yeah, I've seen in the chat questions around DBE. So DBE stands for the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise. And thanks, Rose, for putting a link for a resource there. So I want to hit on this specifically because as we think about, the project, we often think about, the outcomes. What will it be? What will the physical infrastructure look like when we're done? But with this program, we're also taking a really intentional approach to how and who is building the project. And so this economic diversity program is focused on maximizing opportunities for small businesses, disadvantaged business enterprises, as well as maximizing the diversity of the workforce. So we have specific goals set to hold ourselves accountable in partnership with our contractor who will ultimately be building this as we move forward. So the project does have a goal range for utilization of disadvantaged business enterprises of 18 to 22%. And what that means is of the dollars going towards the construction for the project, 18 to 22% of those dollars would need to be programmed for small businesses, minority-owned businesses, disadvantaged business enterprises. By way of workforce, there's a couple different goals as well for apprenticeships and diverse workforce for 25% minority male and 14% female workforce. And with this, we are providing a number of technical assistance and mentor opportunities to help build up individuals that would typically have a barrier to entering the construction industry to help provide that career development opportunity and growth beyond just the Rose Quarter project. So we're seeing about $200 million in opportunities for the economic diversity program. So with that, Rose, I'll turn it back to you for a wrap up and we'll go from there.
Great, thank you. Can we go to slide 23, please?
Oh, and this is still me, I think, by way of next steps. So just as an update, we are developing agreements with our partners as we move forward through kind of early in 2022 and advancing the environmental review process through this calendar year. And again, beginning construction in late 2023. So Rose, now I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Megan. So we are really grateful that everyone's able to attend today, and we want to make sure that everyone in the community has access to information about the project and can contact us with any comments or questions. So you can see that our email for contact is down there on the slide. Our website is there, and then a phone number as well. So a few ways to contact us. And we ask that you share within your network the importance of this project. Feel free to spread the word, spread the resources on our website that we have. And if you have if you have other groups that you think would be interested in this presentation or any kind of other engagement about the project, let us know. We'd love to hear about it, and we'll be there for another briefing if someone requests it. So with that, we did promise some question and answer time, and we have about 15 minutes for that. And if we do kind of get cut short on time and we don't have enough time to address everyone's questions, you can certainly leave us with them, and we can be sure to follow up with perhaps with Jeff with some answers for you. And I think we can just kind of go here. I'm going to go with sorry, there's a lot of folks and I see hands. So I'm going to just see what the first one is. Phil here, and then maybe we can go to Ron next.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great presentation. I've got a couple, there's hundreds of questions about this, but two of them would be, is the project fully funded at this point, or does it need some funding from some other organization? And then a totally different question is, if you're running thousands of more cars and trucks through that area, how does that help the climate?
So I can take that. So by way of funding, Bill, we have House Bill 2017 provides the right now the only dedicated funding for the project. And we know that we have a funding gap. So part of our process as we continue to move forward through the technical analysis is to put together that finance plan to fill the funding gap to be able to fund the project in full. So to directly answer your question, no, we do not have full funding for the project. And by way of your question around kind of the traffic and how that relates to climate action, what we've done some robust traffic modeling in this area, and what we see is by addressing the bottleneck, we're improving that traffic flow on I-5. And so while we anticipate that there will be more cars on I-5 by improving that bottleneck. However, those vehicles, what's showing is in our in the network, those vehicles are already in the system, but they're diverting off of I-5 now to avoid the bottlenecks, say onto interstate, MLK. So those cars would now be back on the interstate system. So it's not that there are new vehicles in the network. It's just the redistribution of where they are and what roads or highways they are using. And also what we are seeing through the modeling that we followed kind of the national and state standards for is by improving the traffic flow, you're reducing the amount of cars that are idling, stop and go traffic where you see a great number of emissions. So by improving the traffic flow, there is a slight improvement in air quality with that as well.
Won't the cover trap a lot of pollutants, and do you have something special in that cover to remove the pollutants?
Yeah, so the highway cover will include a ventilation system to address the emissions that would be happening within the cover. So similar to perhaps other tunnels that you've traveled through, you'll sometimes see those vents and whatnot. So those will be incorporated into the highway cover.
Thank you, Phil.
Brandon, you have a question.
I think Ron also was in there as well. I don't want to skip over Ron. And Megan, there is a question. What is an operative engineer?
Operative engineer is someone that would be kind of working on construction that would be operating equipment, so specialized construction equipment.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt there, Jeff or Jim. I had told Ron he could go next, and then I'll let you kind of take over the facilitation here.
Go
ahead, Ron.
I live in the northeast part of town, and actually that's my exit. So I'm looking forward to you getting it done. I've been a supporter of the project. So, and I went through you had a computer, in a sense, almost like a game to try to piece different pieces of puzzle. I found that a very fascinating process to go through. So my question is, you've moved the off-ramp for as you're going southbound, a little bit further south. And it looks like it is shorter than the off-ramp is currently. And is that going to back up onto the freeway? I noticed, one of these days the Blazers will actually do a better job, and we'll have those crowds back. And, when the Blazers did well, even though they're 2 lanes, it would back up onto the highways. People came to the game. It looks like you've got shorter space. So is that going to create a bottleneck of some sort back onto the freeway?
Yeah, Ron, good question. So the off-ramp will actually, it's not as short as it looks on that image. It does actually extend for a portion underneath the highway cover as well. But the question that you are raising is one that, as we are working on the design, are paying very close attention to, given that the reason we are doing the project is to improve safety and operations. And so as we design it, ensuring that we're still meeting those objectives.
Okay, good. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Okay, go for it, Brandon.
So my question then is, one of the criticisms of this project that I've heard, and I have no idea how valid this is or not, and I'd like you to address it, is that by adding more freeway space, we're essentially inviting more cars, and we're not actually addressing the problem long term, and it's just going to create the same amount of congestion with more cars. Can you address that one way or the other?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think ODOT, we understand that we can't build our way out of congestion, but we do understand that there are key bottlenecks that we have to address. And so the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project is really addressing a geometric issue where there's just not enough space and time for drivers to make those merging and weaving movements with the 5 or 6 on and off ramps that come in that area where 3 interstates come together. So we have the bottleneck. And again, with the traffic analysis that we've done, we know that by incorporating the auxiliary lanes and addressing the bottleneck, there will be more cars on I-5. But those cars are not new cars in the transportation network. They're cars that are already driving, that are using, say, the local streets like Interstate or Martin Luther King Boulevard to divert away from the existing bottleneck. So by addressing the bottleneck, we're putting those cars back onto the highway system where they belong instead of being on the local streets. And so again, think of it not as new cars added to the system, but the distribution of where the cars are in the system.
Dave Malcolm.
Thank you. With the highway covers in effect, we're going to have new real estate in the said community spaces. So I suppose some of it might be, kind of park-like, but I suspect there's also going to be, will there be buildings, for businesses or something like that? And along those lines of thought, if there's going to be new structures for work or maybe even residences, what's going to be the owner of that real estate? Is ODOT going to end up being a landlord, or what's the plan? Thank you.
Yeah, Dave, good question. So by way of what will be programmed and kind of what the future uses will be on the top of the highway cover, that will have to be led by an entity with land use authority. So ODOT is responsible for, say, building the highway cover, but an entity, a government agency with land use authority is going to be working with the community to define what those uses are on top. So to your point, is it a building? Is it some other active space? And ODOT will always own the land because it's crossing over I-5. And so any uses that are on top will have to be through some sort of lease agreement. We're actively working through how creative we can get in that process to ensure that we're maximizing the benefit for the community. So definitely more to come. We're asking ourselves a lot of those same questions. That's to come in the planning process.
So some of it's going to be like, here's parameters. These are limits. We can't exceed the limits, or we must do certain things to meet the minimum, to meet limits. But beyond that, it might well be the city agency or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
I think we have time for probably one more question. Shantu?
Yes, how would you mitigate the gentrification?
I'm sorry, it cut out. Could you repeat the question?
How would you mitigate the gentrification concern you have?
How will you mitigate the gentrification concerns?
Good question. So that again is going to be in partnership with the community. So Alex mentioned we have advisory committees. We have a historic Albina advisory board that's helping us on the design front, and then a community oversight advisory committee that's helping us on the workforce and disadvantaged business enterprise front, but really working in tandem with those entities to help us make sure that as that kind of future land use programming on top is cognizant of and benefiting the historic Albina community in a way that again is focused on the community that was harmed when I-5 was originally built. So that'll also be, Shantu, incorporated into the future land use process. That's a bit kind of separate from the transportation piece, but something that we're trying to talk about really early so we can reduce any barriers or build in policy early to prevent that.
And the continuing question of that is, how would you avoid the homelessness, people staying around these new exits and new covers?
I think we have a lot more work to do on that. I don't have a good answer for you today, but that's definitely top of mind for our team as we're working towards, during construction, but also envisioning, what it would eventually be programmed on top of those highway covers to be sensitive to that concern.
I want to thank you, Megan and Rose and Alex, for being here today. I think we probably have another hour's worth of questions that we'd like to talk about. The complexity of what you're doing is mind-boggling to me. I was talking about it with somebody recently about, how are they going to keep the flow of traffic going through I-5 during the construction? How can we still have traffic going through? And then all the other complexities. Thank you for your work and for working with the community. And we look forward to whatever is going to happen.